Cemeteries, and particularly Catholic cemeteries, are fascinating places. All around are signs and markers left by those who visit their loved ones buried here. They leave flowers and flags, headstones and markers. Much of the cemetery is adorned with beautiful religious statuary. Stone statements of faith, our Catholic faith, that death is not the end, that we live beyond in heaven, as Jesus our Lord revealed to us. But can we know that? Is there any evidence that our belief in life after we die is reasonable? In fact, yes, there is. We know our religion tells us we're supposed to believe in life after death in heaven. But if you were given the chance, what kind of proof would you ask for, would you need? Some evidence that could come from the sciences, perhaps? Or would you look for the personal testimonies of real people? Maybe it would take you to say, I won't believe it unless I experience something myself that'll prove it. Would you want God himself to show it to you? Let's see if all these things might not be possible. Let's look at some interesting things that have been learned through the sciences of anthropology and archaeology. These sciences reveal that from prehistoric times, people have buried their dead with great care, most commonly placing items in the grave, sometimes quite valuable ones. Our museums the world over are full of them. Are not these apparent evidence to their belief that their loved ones would be in need of such things in a life after they had died? As well, the world over, famous structures have been raised to serve as burial chambers and resting places, or as monuments to a society's belief in an afterlife. In fact, such evidence can be found in cultures spread all over the globe. Peoples who never had any contact with each other. Indeed, we have never discovered a people whose culture did not have faith in an afterlife. No single human society ever was built on the belief that death is the end. What is called oblivion awaits. In scientific circles, when a phenomenon recurs with near, if not in fact actual, universal frequency, such a phenomenon is given great credence. What about personal testimonies from real people? My ministry as a priest has allowed me to meet so many people from all around the world. Frequently, ministry brings me in touch with people who are quite ill, even close to death, and occasionally, people who have actually died and been brought back to life, been revived. When I speak to them after their experience, they report a story so similar that to me, it cannot be just a coincidence. Let me share a few of them with you. One man had an experience so important to him that he actually wrote it up in a book. While he was on a vacation, he had an accident. And during the course of being treated, his heart stopped beating. He actually was dead for a few minutes. And this is his recollection. I heard the doctors talking about me as though I wasn't there. I wanted to tell them that I could hear what they were saying, but I could not speak. I was floating around watching the commotion. I was not feeling any pain and was intrigued by the rush of doctors and nurses around me. It was a little hard to see, as there was a light all around me, growing very bright. And at the same time, I didn't care exactly where I was. Still listening to what was going on around me, I felt like I was being drawn away from the doctors and nurses, and it was becoming harder and harder to hear them talking. Being distracted like that made me more aware of another wonderful thing. It was sort of like the sun, bright and warm and very inviting. You know the feeling like closing your eyes, facing the sky, and feeling the warmth of the sun on your face, except I didn't have to close my eyes. It didn't hurt to look right at what seemed to be the source of the light. The first seemed to have been a speck in the bright light from infinity, but this speck became larger and larger. It took on the shape of a man drawing close to me. This man records that he then had an encounter with his father, who had already died. As the encounter was drawing to a close, he wrote, "My father gave me one last smile and said, 'Another time,' to me. And I turned from him, and he did not turn from me as we parted. I turned my head to the right to walk away, and at that moment, I opened my eyes to see my wife in the hospital room. She looked happy, but had been crying." Another account was given to me by a woman who died on the table after a complication from childbirth, and she wrote it to me, and I'll read you what she wrote. "The nurses and the doctor went into frantic action. After a short while, I found that I had lost the ability to move or speak. I could hear the doctor say, 'We are losing her.' Watching the medical team work for a while, I felt myself leave my body and hover near the ceiling at the corner of the labor room. I was not feeling any pain, but was interested in observing the doctor work on my body, which I knew was mine, although I, my conscious self, was hovering above. I was soon met by a light which was white and incredibly bright. It was whiter and more brilliant than any form of white we know on earth. Even though this brightness was just short of blinding white and was brighter than the sun, it didn't hurt to look at it. I perceived that in the light was a loving being. He came to welcome me and accompany me on my journey." She talks about the other thoughts she had of love and acceptance. And eventually the question occurred to her, was it time for her to go? And she writes this: "After experiencing this love, and in a deeper and fuller way, if that is possible, I realized that I had to go back. If we are gifted with all this love, and I had never realized it before I had died, I must attempt to tell others. It dawned on me that Jesus deserves to be loved so much more than we are able to comprehend. I begged him to come back so that I could tell the people." She writes that suddenly she found herself back in her body, lying in the room. I saw the sad look on the doctor's face as he stood looking at my body. But quickly that look turned to hope as I opened my eyes and moved, and my blood pressure started to rise. The medical team went into frantic action until my condition was stabilized. And finally, this last account, which I've recorded actually talking to the fellow who experienced it. And I was just hoping you might be able to share what you felt like happened when you died.
When I died, it was shocking. I walked to the top of my stairs, and all of a sudden I just felt and heard something. I turned around, and I watched my body going down the stairs. My wife and son came running. I had a full awareness that I was at the top of the stairs and at the bottom at the same time. And almost in a brief second, I felt swept away. It was like a bluish-gray type of foggy surroundings. At the same time, I had full awareness of where I was. I could still see what was going on, but I knew I was elsewhere. I had deep remorse. I almost saw my whole life. I saw my whole life from birth to that moment before me. Remorse, and then all of a sudden it like brightened up. I felt like movement again, and very bright light beyond anything I ever saw. And such a feeling of calm. I had no pain. First time I've had no pain in 5 years. No pain whatsoever. No fear. Total absorption of love came through me. And I knew that I had been forgiven for my past, for God's mercy. At the same time, I was being told from within I was going to be okay. I had this inner voice talking to me from within, saying that I should always pray for holy humanity, for all people, no praying for one person, pray for all. Pray for souls in purgatory. And to always remember that with my prejudices that I did experience at one time, that God created all men in his own image, and the image is not what we see, it is the image from within. And that I had some trials to go in my life, and then all of a sudden I was in the ambulance.
And of course, I'm glad you were restored back to us, thank God. But the last thing I would ask you about, is it safe to say that when the time does come that God calls you home again, for good this time, you're not too afraid of that time now?
I look forward to that day, to feel that love that I felt that day. The thing that hurts me more than anything, as much as I love my family, was being taken away from that feeling of total awe, the total love that I had at that moment in time.
So now we've seen that maybe from anthropology or archaeology, there's reason to know that people have always believed that there's life after we die, pretty persuasively. And maybe with those witnesses from real people, people I've known and met here in ministry, there's such a commonality of experience to believe that something is really legitimately happening to them when their heart stopped beating, when for those moments before they were revived, they were dead, I guess. But how about this? Let's go to the third idea of how to talk about, do you believe that death is not the end? Is there anything we can do in ourselves, by our own person? Any examination of experience that you have yourself that might be able to back you up on the reality of our immortal lives, our immortal souls, that death is not the end. And in fact, I think you can do kind of a little personal experiment yourself. There's in two ways, two things you do. One, I'm sure you can do right now. And the second one, if you're, I don't know, only 20 or younger, maybe you haven't lived enough to do it, but you can trust me on this one, or you can go ahead and do your own experiment. Ask somebody who's been around for half a century and see if what I say is not in fact universal. So what are the two ways that you yourself can check and see if you have in fact an immortal soul within you? The first way involves this very old picture of me when I was 7 days old on the day of my baptism, with my sister Mary and my brother Bobby as my godparents. Science will tell us that in just about every 7 or 10 years, every cell in our body reproduces. That would mean that in my lifetime, 4 or 5 times over, every cell in my body has been replaced. There is nothing left physically of me that was there on my baptism. But if there's nothing about me that's still physically the same, or of my sister Mary or my brother Bobby from that day that they all remember, or from any of my childhood memories or my growing up memories, then that invites the question, who am I? What am I really, if not my body? The answer is you are your soul. If every part of your body is not physically who it was, what it was physically when you were born, or from your memories of kindergarten or first grade or whatever you can remember back to, then what is the you inside? It's your immortal soul. It's not dependent on your physical being. Allow me to use another old photo to make the second point. This is a photo of me greeting Monsignor Coffey at the 75th anniversary of his priesthood more than a decade ago. As I look at this old photo, I cannot believe that much time has passed. I remember the day clearly. I feel like the same me that was there. And you'll hear that kind of thing from other folks who've lived life for some years. They feel like time flies past. They cannot believe how old they become on the outside. They'll say things like, that felt like just yesterday. If that has not in fact happened to you, ask somebody you know who's older. My guess is they'll say they've had that experience too. The reason for this is very simple. Our souls are immortal. They are not made to feel the passing of time. They are made to last forever in heaven with God, and so are immune to the passing of time. And finally, we get to what God himself has to say about it. In Jesus Christ, God has said everything we need to know about life after death. Jesus is the first of those to rise from the dead. He revealed to us what our glorious future will be in his resurrection and in the teachings he told the disciples in his gospel.
Jesus said to his disciples, "Do not let your hearts be troubled. You have faith in God, have faith also in me. In my Father's house there are many dwelling places. If there were not, would I have told you that I'm going to prepare a place for you? And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come back again and take you to myself, so that where I am, you also may be. Where I am going, you know the way." Thomas said to him, "Master, we do not know where you are going. How can we know the way?" Jesus said to him, "I am the way, and the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me."
So you see, in fact, we have great reason to believe that there is life after death, that our lives go on, that we have immortal souls, and that everything Jesus meant, everything he taught us, and everything he promises are worth putting your faith in.